Since it was my daughter Rebecca's 45th birthday, I wanted to make sure the day was special. I had been saving money for weeks so that I could buy a cake from her favorite bakery. It was the kind of cake that made her think of her childhood, when she used to eat chocolate and strawberries. I didn't think anything was too expensive for my only child. I thought $200 was too much, but I didn't think it was too much for my child. I thought she would be thrilled when I knocked on her door, and maybe even give me a hug, like she did when she was a kid when birthdays were full of laughter. I was being very careful with the cake. When the door opened, Rebecca looked annoyed. She never smiled or looked me in the eye. She said, "Oh, it's you," in a low voice, not knowing how much those 3 words would mean to him. I said, "Happy birthday, my love," with a fake smile. "Just like when you were a child, I made sure to bring your favorite cake." She sighed in a manner that made me feel like I was a burden, as if my presence was causing her day to go downhill. Without so much as a thank you, she ushered me inside. As I entered her living room, I couldn't help but remark how stunningly lovely the house was, the identical house I had paid for when she got married. This was accomplished by withdrawing $50,000 from my life savings, a sum that I had accumulated as a nurse who had worked double hours for decades. I had assumed at that time that I was providing her with a foundation for a happy life, but I now understand that she considered it to be nothing more than something that she had a right to. We were sitting on the couch, and she was speaking in a cold, emotionless tone, which I had become all too familiar with over the course of the last few years. She stated, "Mom, I have been giving a lot of thought to what I truly want to have for my birthday." I was anxious to provide her with anything she requested, so I nodded my head enthusiastically. "Would you be interested in going on a trip? Jewelry? A car?" However, I was made to feel uncomfortable by her eyes, which were piercing and brimming with disdain. She spoke the words that broke my heart with a slow, deliberate manner. "The only thing I want is for you to die." For a brief moment, I felt as if the room were spinning around me. I was experiencing difficulty breathing, and my heart was beating rapidly. "What is going on? What was it that you were saying?" I spoke in a hushed tone. Without displaying the slightest hint of regret, she stated, "You heard what I said. If you would stop harassing me all the time, contacting me and dropping by my place, my life would be a lot less complicated. You make me feel like I cannot breathe. I simply wish for you to disappear." My hands trembled, and the cake that was in my lap felt as if it was melting into a horrible reminder of all that I had lost. I reflected on the years that I had dedicated to her, the time when she was 3 and sick, and I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for her medication, the time when she was 16 and wanted an $800 prom dress, and I worked on the weekends in order to purchase it for her, the time when I paid $42,000 for her college tuition regardless of how many times she changed her major, the time when I spent $35,000 for her dream wedding in a ballroom, the time when I gave $150,000 for the down payment on this very house, the time when I paid $16,000 to cover their mortgage while her husband David was unemployed, the time when I gave an additional $4,000 for braces for the twins, the time when I babysat night after night for free so that they could live their lives. After decades of effort and over $500,000, the only thing she wanted was for me to die. She did nothing more than fold her arms around her chest and accuse me of suffocating her, despite my attempts to remind her of my love for her. She stated that what I felt for her was not love, but rather an attempt to control her. She stated that my efforts were not actually sacrifices at all, but rather attempts to manipulate her. I stood up and made my way to the door, my legs shaking, while still carrying the cake that I had purchased as a token of my unwavering loyalty to him. I took one last look over my shoulder, hoping to catch a glimmer of regret or a hint of a remembrance of the precious infant I had once cradled in my arms, but all I saw on her face was impatience. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Rebecca," as I shut the door behind me. She wanted me to leave so that she could celebrate her birthday without me. On that evening, I was by myself in my flat, sitting and gazing at the destroyed cake that I had thrown away. Tears were flowing down my face as I pondered the years that I had given away for nothing. Every cent, every receipt, every night that I had gone without food in order to provide her with more. I remembered all of it. For her upbringing, I had to spend $200,000. For her education, I spent $42,000. For her wedding, I spent $35,000. For her house, I spent $150,000. For her mortgage payments, I spent $16,000. For her braces, I spent $4,000, and for her gifts, I spent $10,000. These numbers whirled around in my head. In total, about 500,000 people. I could have lived a life of ease throughout my retirement, traveled the world, and never had to worry about paying my bills if I had saved that money, including the interest it would have earned. I held the belief that investing in love was more worthwhile than investing in myself, and as a result, I resided in a modest flat with just enough resources to make ends meet. However, love should never make you feel this way. I was desperate to think that she didn't really mean it, and I was also anxious for her to tell me that she was simply upset and that she didn't actually mean what she said, so I called her that evening. She did, however, affirm them in a cool manner. Naturally, I was serious about what I said, Mother. You're too focused on me. Your love for me makes me feel like I'm going to die. That was the moment when sadness turned into something sharper, and I knew I needed you to go. Wrath. A feeling of righteous anger. Realization. For the first time in my life, I knew that I had been tricked and used for decades. Did she want me to leave her life? Maybe it was time to give her what she wanted, but not in the way she thought it would happen. The next morning, I got up in my best clothes and went to the bank. I stopped the joint account I had set up for emergencies and took back the $20,000 I had put in for her family's benefit. After that, I went to the mortgage firm and got all the papers that stated what my rights were as a cosigner. These rights might let me get her house back. In the end, I went to the lawyer I had hired and changed my will so that she would not be able to get any of my things. Instead, I gave everything to charity and set up a trust fund for my grandkids. I felt strong for the first time in a long time. Felt full of life. She wanted me to go, didn't she? I would disappear, but in doing so, I would get back my life, my money, and my dignity. That night, while I was drinking wine and discussing plans for my future, I realized that sometimes the most terrible statements may bring out the strongest parts of myself. I was ready to make my daughter's wish come true by leaving in the most startling way possible, but she had no idea how far I was going to go. That was just the beginning. But she was only just starting to understand how far I was willing to go, and she had no idea how far that would be. I hadn't been so determined in years, but when I woke up the next morning, I was full of it. I felt like the heavy weight of shame and absolute dedication had finally been taken off my shoulders. For the last 45 years, my daughter has been the most important person in my life. I have given her my time, money, health, and objectives. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. The first thing I did was gather all of my financial papers, like all the receipts I had carefully preserved throughout the years. What was found when each gift was opened was not a story of love returned, but a story of love taken advantage of. I had prepared a paper trail of all the sacrifices I had made, including every check I had written, every mortgage payment I had made, and every gift I had bought. It made me feel empty, but she didn't seem to care. When I ran my hands over the piles of papers, I told myself, I'm never going to do this again. My lawyer, Anil, listened carefully as I explained why I made my choice. He replied softly, saying, I have seen mothers give everything, but I have never seen a child repay that sacrifice with such violence. Julieta, that is what I have seen from you. Are you sure this is the best thing to do? I looked into his eyes and nodded my head. She wanted me to go. She told me that her life would be easier if I weren't around. That's exactly what I'm going to give her. But I won't go away without putting up a fight. She needs to know what it will cost her to lose me. He thought as he put on his glasses and made the changes he needed to. He then sat down and started writing the legal papers. These included the revised will, the cancellation of her access to his life insurance, the trust fund for his grandkids, and the notices for her health insurance and joint accounts. We spent hours signing one paper after another. It seemed like I was freeing myself every time I added a signature, and every time I stamped something, it was a sign that I was taking back control of my life. When I left his office, I didn't feel like a shattered mother anymore. I felt like I had become a lady again. I realized that the city looked very different when I wasn't feeling obligated to do anything as I walked around the streets at night. The air felt cleaner and the lights were brighter. For the first time I thought about what I wanted to happen in my own life. He thought more and more about leaving everything behind with each step he made. That night, I was at home and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I decided to call a travel firm that I had saved a phone number for months before. They only worked with older people. "Good evening to you," I said to them. "I saw that you were running an ad for a move to Switzerland, and this is Julieta Johnson. Could you please give me all the information?" When I hung up, I was very excited since the person on the other end was kind and willing to help. Not only was a new life imaginable, it was already happening. But before I left, I had to make sure that my daughter fully understood what she had lost. I began to write a letter, which would turn out to be the most significant letter of my life. I wrote page after page to thank her for everything she had done for me. The dress I worked weekends to pay for, the wedding I paid for, the house I got, the kids I babysat without complaint, the mortgage payments, the braces, the never-ending gifts, the medical bills I paid when she was sick, and so on. I kept track of every money, every sacrifice, and every time I chose to put her happiness ahead of my own. But this wasn't just a list of money. It was also a list of love. After that, I reminded her of what she had said, which was the worst birthday wish a mother could possibly get. "I just want you to die." I informed her that I had heard her loud and clear and that I was finally going to grant her request. Even though I was furious, the letter didn't say anything about it. It was calm, planned, and impossible to argue with. I also sent copies of all the legal papers I had signed that week with the letter. These included the will, the trust, property reclaim notifications, and account closures. Before Rebecca could read it, her rich life would start to fall apart, and by the time she did, she would know that her own words had caused it to happen. "Rebecca, you asked me to go away. This is the last thing I wrote in the letter. You will start to comprehend what it really means to live without me now that I'm not here." Rebecca called me when I was making preparations. She asked me if I could watch the twins because she and David were going to an event. I would have said yes right away for years, but this time I said no. It was almost funny how much she didn't believe it. "What do you mean when you say you can't do it?" she said. I said in a calm voice, "I already have something planned." She got angry and started to spit, calling me theatrical, greedy, and immature before saying, "Plans that are none of your business." The only thing I did was repeat what she had said. "Rebecca, you wanted me to disappear from your life. I am going to get started right now." The fact that she didn't get any pushback from the other person on the phone made it clear to me that she understood I was being serious for the first time. The next few days were calm as I secretly made plans. I booked a flight to Zurich, packed my most important things into 2 suitcases, and took out $30,000 in cash from my savings account. Elvira, my neighbor, had seen the sacrifices I had made for many years and agreed to help me carry out my plan. She would be the one to find my flat empty, deliver the letter, and tell Rebecca that I had left. She smiled and said, "It is absolutely brilliant. That ungrateful girl will eventually come to the realization of everything that she has lost." Her support gave me the courage to go through with it, and we were able to plan every single detail. Elvira greeted me with a cup of coffee and a smile the morning I left. She promised to do her best to keep her promises. "I spent 30 years of my life working as a drama teacher," she said with a laugh. As I got into the cab with my bags, I looked back at my flat one last time. "Trust me, Rebecca will believe every word," I told myself. Felt free, not sad. I told the driver to take me to the airport. Those words felt like a spell, closing off my old life and opening the door to a new one. Even though the flight to Zurich was a little long, I felt at peace for the first time in years. No one knew where I was, so I didn't have to answer to anyone for my time, money, or love. The burden of always having to make sacrifices was replaced by the feeling of eager expectation that was building up inside of him. When I got there, a young man from the travel agency met me and took me to a furnished flat near the lake. It was small, comfortable, and perfect. The next day, I went out and expo. Meanwhile, Elvira was doing her job at home. She sent Rebecca the letter and the papers, and soon my phone started ringing with urgent calls. First, Rebecca yelled for answers. Then she tried to convince them by begging, then she tried to scare them, and then she started crying. But none of the messages she sent showed any real remorse, which was the one thing that could have made a difference. Instead, they were scared about money, the property, and the possibility of losing the security. I wanted to know, I asked. The silence on the other end of the queue told me all I needed to know. I didn't feel bad when I hung up on my kid, which was the first time I had ever done that. That night, I went to a restaurant by the lake and ordered salmon with caviar. I drank a bottle of wine and raised a glass to my new freedom. For the first time in all the years since I became a mother, I was living for myself. I was 72 years old at the time. However, even after I began to adjust to this new existence, I was certain that Rebecca would not give up. Throughout our relationship, she had always been able to find a way to influence me, to bend things to her advantage. As it turned out, just a few weeks later, I received a phone call from a social worker, which was exactly what I had been expecting. Rebecca had submitted a complaint in which she alleged that I was making decisions without careful consideration, and that I was afflicted with dementia. It was her intention to present me as someone who was unstable, to contest the will and the financial adjustments, and to recover power. I did not succumb to terror, despite the fact that my blood was boiling. I demonstrated beyond any doubt that I was completely competent by succeeding on every examination and agreeing to all of the evaluations. Rebecca was left with both nothing in her hands and an official record of having filed fraudulent complaints once the case was ended. She had passed a line that she could never go back from. I spent some time on my balcony in Zurich that night looking at the Alps. The lake reflected the city's lights, and the air was cool and refreshing. I thought about everything I had been through, everything I had given up, and everything I had lost. I realized that something important was true. My daughter's harshness had not destroyed me. It had freed me. She had given me life by saying she wanted me to die. She had forced me to go on a journey of self-discovery by casting me out. She didn't know it at the time, but this was just the first chapter in a story she would never forget. It was more than just an escape. It was meant to be educational. And the hardest lessons to learn are always the ones that leave scars. Because the most difficult lessons to learn are invariably the ones that leave scars. The weeks that followed in Switzerland were like chapters out of a book that I never thought I would have the opportunity to write myself. I would wake up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window every morning. In addition, I could hear the faint hum of a city that was not plagued by the sound of Rebecca's voice. I went for a walk by the lake, I went to several markets, and I became a member of a group of retired people who went on hikes together. These people, like myself, had waited until later in life to really start living for themselves. For many years, my world had been confined to such a narrow space. It was all about Rebecca's phone calls, Rebecca's demands, and Rebecca's requirements. However, each time the sun rose, my world became larger. In a manner that instilled feelings of both happiness and resentment in me. I experienced what it was like to be free. Joyful, since I was finally alive and living my life to the fullest. Furious, because I came to the realization that I had squandered a significant portion of my life by acting as someone else's servant while hiding behind the facade of being a good mother. As one might expect, the phone was not quiet for an extended period of time. I had banned Rebecca's phone, but messages still managed to get through to me via emails, contacts that I didn't recognize, and even letters that were passed by people who lived next door to me. Initially, she took on the role of a daughter who was anxious for assistance. "I miss you, Mother. The children are longing for your presence. Please come home." However, as the days passed by and turned into weeks, the tone of the message changed. "We are being threatened by the bank. You need to repair this." This is followed by anger. "You are causing us to fail. You should not treat members of your own family in this manner." Every message that I received confirmed my suspicions that she did not miss me as an individual. As the person who was responsible for providing her with financial support, she missed me. The love that she had supposedly felt for me was nothing more than a reliance on the material goods and services that I could supply. I felt more certain in my resolve to keep my distance from her as I read each frantic word that she had written. I wasn't stupid, though. I knew Rebecca well enough to know that she would do anything to get what she wanted. When Anil, my lawyer, called me from our hometown, I got the news. His voice was calm and firm, but not angry. He told Julieta that her daughter had hired a lawyer. She was trying to contest the will by saying that you weren't in your right mind when you made the changes. I almost laughed. Are you thinking clearly? I told him that I had never been more sure of anything in my life. Anil agreed and promised me that he had recorded everything, from our conversations to the detailed directions I had given him. This proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had made my decisions on purpose and for good reasons. He promised me that she would not win this fight. However, the fact that she was trying to do it showed how desperate she was. My daughter had gone from wanting me to die to trying to take away my freedom by spreading false information. There was a time when it could have been enough to break me. It could have caused me to regress back into a state of guilt and subjection. However, it is no longer the case. I had already endured the most excruciating pain that one could ever experience, the torment of hearing her express her desire for my death, and I had made it through. No matter what she did now, it would not be able to pain me more than that particular moment. Defying her, on the other hand, was something that gave me energy. I enrolled in German language courses, registered for art lessons, and uncovered interests that I had suppressed for decades. Every brushstroke that I produced on the canvas, every new word that I learnt, and every friend that I met in Zurich served as a reminder to me that I was not too old to start over again. My injuries were not so severe that they could not be treated. I did not arrive too late in life to be able to live. After that, something very unexpected occurred. On one particular evening, I was going through the deluge of emails that I usually disregarded when I noticed a name that I recognized. David, who is my son-in-law. The man who had stood behind Rebecca for years without saying a word, reaping the rewards of my sacrifices while never once questioning her harshness. The email he sent was of a lengthy nature, and it was filled with remorse. He confessed that he had observed the ways in which Rebecca had exploited me and how she had taken advantage of me. However, he had chosen to keep his mouth shut because he was afraid and dependent on her. He expressed to me that he respected my fortitude in leaving and that he was hopeful that I had achieved peace of mind. In addition, he informed me that the twins, who are my grandchildren, missed me and that Rebecca had lied to them, telling them that I was ill and unable to come for a visit. When I read his words, I felt something move within of me. A peculiar feeling of being justified rather than forgiving at last. Someone in that family had admitted that the truth was what it was. Still, I didn't respond with warmth. I thanked him for being honest, but I also reminded him that apologies sent after years of silence can't undo the harm that has been done. I told him, in order to prevent it from being too late, make sure to teach your children to appreciate the people who love them. That is the only way for you to show respect for what I have given you. After that, he was silent, which made me think he understood what I was saying. My life truly started to get better in Switzerland. I joined a reading club and met women who told stories of how their kids didn't appreciate them. I felt less alone than I had in years. Ingrid had moved on to a new life after deciding to leave her toxic family behind in Germany. Maria, another woman, had fled to Italy when her son started to treat her like a pocketbook instead of his mother. We were pulled together by our shared pain, but more importantly, we were joined together by our shared will to live. We traveled together, learned together, and had fun together. Even after being betrayed, we were living proof that life could go on. It's important to remember that Rebecca didn't give up her fight. She tried to get in touch with banks, filed more complaints, and tried to get into accounts that she no longer had permission to access. But all of the attempts failed. Because of the barricades I built with Anil's help, nothing could move forward. It took her a while, but she finally realized the truth. I was gone and would never come back. She had to face with the consequences of that realization, which she could no longer deny. As soon as they didn't have my money or my safety net, she and David started to drown. The expenses kept piling up, the mortgage payments kept coming, and in the end, the property I had given them was lost for good. When Anil called to tell me that the foreclosure was over and that I could get my money back, I didn't feel bad. Only fairness. The place where they had humiliated me before was no longer theirs to call home. It was once again mine, as the law said it should be. It was clear that the irony was there. Rebecca wanted me to depart, but when I did, she lost everything else too. And the truth was that I didn't enjoy the fact that she had failed. I felt bad for her. But I was also happy to see that she was held responsible for her choices in a way that fit what she did. She has been taking my sacrifices for granted for a very long time. She was about to find out how much it would cost her to get rid of them. Because I made smart investments in Switzerland, my savings there grew. For the first time in my life, I was able to save more money than I thought I would ever have when I got older. I traveled to Paris, Rome, and Vienna. When I was a kid, I only saw the streets I walked on in books. Every trip I took was a sign to the world that I was back in charge of my life. I wasn't there for Rebecca when she needed someone to talk to. I had been betrayed, but I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of what had been destroyed. I had lived through it and became Julieta. But the thing that affected me the most was when I got a handwritten note. I almost threw it away, but then I saw that the handwriting was like that of a child. The twins were the ones who did it. My grandchildren's father taught them what the truth was. They told me they loved me, missed me, and were proud of me for being so strong. They drew me happy amid the mountains, with flowers and sunshine all around me. I cried while I read it, but the tears were not sad. They were hopeful. There is a chance, however little, that they will grow up and learn what love actually means. Maybe my pain will make them think about how they might stop the cycle of exploitation. I told them that my heart was always open to them and that they could always be a part of my life when they were old enough to make their own choices. I also reminded them of something they should never forget. Words can build or destroy. Choose your words carefully. Love with respect, not with demands. Over the years, my life changed in a really special way. I wrote my story as a book so that I could share my pain and give guidance to other women who are going through the same thing. It was a hit because so many people who saw themselves in the words I wrote read it. People from all around the world, including mothers, daughters, and even grandmothers, sent me notes of thanks for giving them the strength to speak up for themselves. Some people have gotten out of bad partnerships. This is the first time that some people have ever set limits. Some people were able to make up with their kids, but they did it in a way that was good for them. The pain I had gone through had not been for nothing. It had become a light that showed other people the path. Rebecca slowly faded into the background of my life, like a shadow. People who live nearby have informed me that she had a rough time. She worked jobs that she would never have picked for herself, and she whined about her selfish mother who had deserted her. But I didn't answer, follow up, or come back. It was because I finally understood that love is not a sort of slavery. Also, being a mother doesn't mean you have to hurt yourself for someone who only sees you as a means to an end. On my 75th birthday, I sat by the lake in Zurich with some new friends, drinking champagne and thinking about Rebecca. 3 years before that, she had offered me her hope that I would die as a birthday gift. And in some ways she got what she wanted. That woman, the mother who had given up everything, who had bent until she broke, who had lived only for her daughter, was now dead. But the world had a new woman in it. Someone who valued her own worth, loved her freedom, and found satisfaction in places where she had been too scared to look before. I smiled as I watched the sun go down behind the mountains in the distance. I had done what Rebecca wanted and disappeared. But she never realized that I wasn't gone. I had come back to life. And the story of what transpired next was nothing like anything she could have expected. It was a story that would change my life and the lives of many others who later found the courage to do the same. A story that would change my life and the lives of countless other people who ultimately got the courage to do the same thing. I was sitting by the lake in Zurich on my 75th birthday, and my new friends were all around me laughing. I understood then that I was no longer a prisoner of what Rebecca had said. I was no longer constrained by what she wanted from me, and I was no longer defined by the fact that she had turned me down. Instead, I was defined by the bravery it took to leave, to make choices based on what I needed, and to build a new life out of the pieces of the old one. But deep down, I knew that the story hadn't really ended. This is because even when we leave people who have hurt us, the memories stay with us. The echoes of the past stay with us, and sometimes the effects of the choices we make stretch out in ways we can't control. This morning was generally boring, although I did get another letter in the mail. The handwriting wasn't very good, but it was still familiar. It was David who sent it. I had never seen him write so honestly before, but that's what he did. He said that life had been harder for him than he thought it would be without my help. He added that he had finally realized that they had depended on me too much for help, both financially and emotionally. He said that instead of taking the initiative to make their own safety, they had exploited me as a safety net. In his letter to Julieta, he said, "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you when Rebecca said those awful things. I wish I had been stronger. But I wasn't. I let her run everything and didn't say anything. I'm really sorry about that." He told me that Rebecca had changed and was no longer the same woman she had been before. "She's broken," he said. "She cries at night. She wishes she could take back what she said. She misses you, but she doesn't know how to get in touch with you." I read the letter slowly, making sure to understand every word. Did what he said convince me? Was this just another case of remorse being used as a cover for lying, or was it conceivable that Rebecca had really changed? I had no idea about that. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to know what was going on, because my peace of mind no longer depended on what she did. I didn't throw away the letter or answer it. Instead, I folded it up and stored it in a drawer. It was not a sign of forgiveness or anger. The day was neutral. I found freedom in that neutrality. The months passed. I began getting requests to speak at women's groups, conferences, and even universities. My book also reached more people. At first, I wasn't sure. I never wanted to talk to a lot of people. But then I remembered all the nights I spent grieving alone, thinking I was the only mother in the world whose child had left her. If my voice could stop even one lady from feeling alone, then it was all worth it. So I told strangers about my life story. I talked about freedom, love, treachery, and sacrifice. People in the audience were crying. I heard others gasp when they recognized me. After that, the women hugged me and thanked me in a quiet voice. "You also told other people my story." After I spoke in Geneva, a young woman called me. She looked like she was less than 30 years old, and her eyes were wide open with emotion. She spoke softly and said, "Johnson, there's something I need to tell you. After I finished reading your book, I called my mom and apologized. I told her I loved her and that I hadn't appreciated her enough." While she was on the phone, she cried. For years, we hadn't been able to talk without getting into a fight. This was the first time in a long time that we could talk without getting into a fight. "You saved our relationship." I hugged her tightly and said, "You saved our relationship." One choice to reveal my truth brought about the healing of generations. I could feel it. Rebecca's shadow was still there, though, in the backdrop. I was able to learn about her life by putting together what I heard from friends and rumors. She had taken a job that she hated. The house was gone, and so was the luxurious existence. She had a job that needed her to work long hours to make ends meet, and she now lived in a small flat. Sometimes, she would act like she was the one who had been injured by saying that I had left her. There were other times when she broke down in public and told her neighbors that she had entirely damaged her connection with her mother. She had to deal with the consequences of what she said, and this was true no matter how many times she told the story. But not all of the news was terrible. The twins started writing to me more often after they turned 13. They sent me letters with drawings, stories about school, and hopes of coming to see me in Switzerland one day. Their innocence was like a salve for my soul. I could feel hope in what they said. The idea that a generation could stop the cycle of behavior they had seen in their parents. I told them that my love for them would never fade, no matter how far apart we were, and that my door would always be open to them. Their messages reminded me that even when one relationship ends, new ones can still grow in its place. I kept changing in ways that I never thought were possible as the years went by. I was able to learn enough German to talk to people who lived there. I created landscapes and sold them in little galleries. I traveled across the Alps, boarded trains all throughout Europe, and spent time in cafes where no one knew anything about me. Every interaction helped me heal, but not as the rejected mother I had been before. Instead, I was rebuilt as the woman who had gotten her self-respect back. Over time, my luck also became better. The money I got back from the foreclosure and the sale of my flat in my hometown, along with smart investments, eventually added up to more than $600,000. It was a great twist of fate for a mom who had eaten rice and beans to pay for her daughter's needs. In my 60s, I had more money than I did in my 40s or 50s. Then, one spring afternoon, I got a package in the mail. There was a big envelope full of handwritten letters. They were women from all around the world who had read my book, watched my interviews, or heard me speak. Some of them were mothers, some were daughters, and some were even grandmothers. Even if the stories they told were different, they all had the same point. They had given too much of themselves, loved too unreservedly, and made too many sacrifices. After hearing my story, they decided to change their ways. Some individuals left dangerous kids behind. For some people, this is the first time they've ever set limits. Some people did forgive, but only on their own terms. I read for hours, crying the whole time, until I saw that my sadness had turned into a legacy of strength. But Rebecca was still a part of me in some manner. No matter how far I had come or how much I had built, she was still the scar on my heart. I would occasionally wonder, especially at night, if she ever thought about me. There were times when I dreamed about the little girl who had once hugged me and said, "Thank you, Mom. You are the best person in the world." That girl was gone for good, or maybe she was just buried under years of hatred and entitlement. Had no idea. I might never know the answer. I knew I was no longer living my life to win her favor. Her gratitude was no longer how I measured my worth. At this point, all I needed was to know that I was in control of my own life. I threw a small dinner party in Zurich for my 76th birthday. The guests were people I had met through my seminars and clubs. As we raised our glasses, one of them asked me, "Julieta, if you could talk to your daughter today, what would you say?" I took a moment to pause and carefully consider my options. After that, I gave a melancholy smile. I would like to express my gratitude. She brought me into this world when she expressed her desire for me to go. She made me complete by shattering me. She liberated me to become the person I was always intended to be by throwing me away. The table grew silent, and then it erupted in applause. The truth of what was spoken, not the applause that followed, is what set me free. And so, as I sit here today on my balcony with a view of the lake and the mountains in the distance, I write the last lines of my book. I am no longer the kind of mother who put her daughter first in all she did. I am Julieta, a woman who has been hurt by treachery, turned her grief into strength, and chosen to keep her dignity instead of giving in to despair. Rebecca once asked me to stay away from her for her birthday as a gift. And that's exactly what I did. But she never realized that I found my genuine self when I disappeared. And maybe, while it's a long shot, the best gift I've ever been able to offer was not to her, but to myself. So, dear listener, I now ask you this. If you were in this circumstance, what would you do? This is because the bravest thing you can do for love isn't always to give more of yourself. Sometimes it's to finally say, "That's enough." People who are unwell may have a runny nose, a sore throat, and a cough, among other things.